And hello. Uh, I'd like to take the opportunity to talk about free speech, relativity, and the law. Before I get back into the What is a Simulation series, which I will endeavour to do very soon. It's something that's been attributed to the internet that it is a realm of free speech, or at least it presents itself in such a way because for some magical and mystical reason, people suddenly feel that they are free to speak if they can type something online. Now, firstly, that's not true. So the internet is not the last bastion of free speech in the world. We can go and stand on a street corner anywhere and say what it is that we want to say. And we can say what it is that we want to say to anybody we meet. So in that process, we have achieved the aim of speaking freely, and our rights have been protected simply in the act of doing it. When we come online, there are different areas of free speech and where it happens and where it doesn't, and where censorship occurs and the reasons for it. So rather than getting into a complicated conversation about, the finer details of that, the reason I bring up the word relativity is because with the introduction of smartphones and apps to the internet, just a quick reminder that the internet existed first, and it existed via protected signal, which is your common everyday phone line, which is protected and operates within a certain subharmonic range. It is operating through the subconscious, but nonetheless it is protected signal. So when we had iPhones, smartphones, and social media apps jumping in and hijacking the internet through telecommunications, what was essentially achieved stupidly in doing that was an attack by multiple frequencies at once through transmission frequencies across multiple telecommunications networks, and an onslaught of public commentary by making the internet available to people through a phone. More people were connected, more people had the opportunity to speak, and more people had the opportunity to stab away at a neural interface, which was previously protected by phone line, and have thereby infected the neural interface with everything that is within the smartphone itself. Now, the one way that you can picture it is that there's for the sake of it, there's a long hose in the middle of the road, and in going through that long hose is the internet through a phone line. And then a bunch of flying monkeys come along and attack it with their thumbs through nasty frequencies, multiple frequencies, all at once, and sort of shout from the depths of their souls about, all the troubles in the world and fight with each other and carry on. And meanwhile, everybody that's within the protected signal band is sitting there going, wow, what's this din? What's this noise? Why is the internet now overloaded with commentary that is non-stop and goes beyond anything that could be ever perceived as safe or even mentally hygienic for the general public? And everything that is typed into the internet via an app and a smartphone is there for good, and it's constant. Social media, you will have noticed your feeds are, not much more than a schizophrenic rabble of random comments and disconnected news items from one topic to the next. We have an ADHD epidemic, and people can't type anything longer than, a short sentence, and won't read anything longer than that either. And this is because the mind has been trained through social media apps in their phones to limit the amount of attention that is paid to any one thing before the next thing drops in through their vertical water torture news feed. So within that, we talk about free speech and censorship, and then we have to look at it in relative terms. Well, if I'm adding commentary to something through a protected signal, it's not Wi-Fi. I'm not attacking the magnetic field by doing so because I'm not using a smartphone. But I happen to ramble on for a bit longer than somebody might like. And I get censored for it. Then we have sort of a very curious scenario, especially when anything that I say is not really noticed by anybody else anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But we end up with a very curious situation because what's happening is there's a bombardment of terrorism signal and enemy signal, which is what smartphones do. Any communications that are happening through the same system where one is attacking the other, the neural interface, is considered enemy signal. Anything coming from a smartphone and typed into the internet via apps is enemy signal. And the reason for saying that, if you just rewind this for a bit, you'll find out we have a magnetic field. We have a certain way that our minds work best. We have certain chemical processes that are occurring in the brain, and when we are bombarded with multiple frequencies at once through multiple telecommunications networks at once, through millions and millions and millions and millions of phones at once, we are at war. We are under attack and we are at war, and the people who are weaponized have no idea, because they've been given their phone that they don't need, and they think it's the new way to do things, and they haven't once thought about what is actually being done, the effect that the technology is having, or what it means, or how it's even affecting them or anybody else. Further to that, they're not interested in listening to any information on it because it doesn't suit the convenience and the thrill they get from feeling important for carrying a smartphone around and able to exercise, in quotes, free speech, which, if we're looking at the internet, is sort of an illusion. As I said before, we are free to speak to anyone, anywhere, anytime. All I need to do is upload this podcast, for example, and I have my free speech. Nobody can take it away from me. Where it gets interesting is if, comment is invited and if comment is invited and your free speech is limited somehow. Look at Twitter, for example. We have a network who originally based their communication method on 140 characters. And most reasonable people, as far as I could see, were frustrated by the fact that they had to shorten everything to 140 characters. I found it very difficult because it wasn't possible for me to get across everything that I was thinking in the detail that I wanted to in 140 characters. And I thought, wow, the people who have made this network probably aren't familiar with what it is to be able to think past 140 characters. So I found Twitter very frustrating and stopped using the network shortly after I joined it. For that reason, it was sort of like just talking into a vast nothing void. And the focus seemed to be on, getting followers and getting people to want to talk to you or talk about stuff that you could see eye to eye on. And then it was sort of like, okay, so we agree, then well, okay, then we've just spoken about it. Then, okay, well, now what? You know, after that, they had the onslaught of celebrities on social media, the onslaught of politicians coming on social media, and now we've all been sucked up into La La Land, where the political circus takes centre stage, and everyone floating around that is commenting on the political circus in America. Obviously, I'm not talking about so many other countries who have better things to do. They've got their own political problems to address, and they have their own lives to live. But for the most part, we're looking at the majority of the Western world thoroughly transfixed on everything that the American political circus is pouncing about on stage, on the social media stage, for the spotlight over. Which is really all it's about. It's a spotlight contest. It's always been a spotlight contest. And lo and behold, if you dare steal the spotlight from anybody, they won't like it. They absolutely won't like it. Not for the people who do it for the spotlight. And when we're looking at the way countries are run and structured, and the end result of all their work is to produce technology which attacks every single individual on the planet, and those of us who are interested at least in some bare minimum of exercising our rights to free speech can be shut down so quickly from being passionate about it and wanting to continue to have that conversation and get it all off our chests. That's it. I mean, that's really it. That is the answer. There is the proof. That is what it really means to have your right to free speech taken from you, whether it is online or off. Similarly, people can just walk away from you because they're not interested in what you have to say, and that's not a violation of your free speech. But in relative terms, we're looking at a system online that is so free in its onslaught. It's 24/7 constant onslaught of commentary from the general public, most of which is the odd short stabbed out sentence here or there, but stuff we already see eye to eye on. And anything longer than that is sort of, people don't really take it in. So even though freedom of speech in that regard hasn't been violated, we need to look at the context that we make our discernments on whether or not what is being said is and the method by which it's being said rather is beneficial. And I can tell you right now that a comment section on any network that has thousands and thousands and thousands of comments in it, well, let's have a look at what the end result of that is. I mean, what happens? Where does it go? What does it do? I guess it gives all of us an idea of where we're all sitting with things. We get to see what other people are thinking, and for those of us that aren't too comfortable with some of the things that is said, we get the opportunity to jump in and have our own say. I'm just not sure that when it comes to free speech, relativity, and the law, that any of us really feel that we are actually being able to express ourselves in the capacity in which we have been invited fully. Now, online, as I said, some networks you can't talk for more than 140 characters. Oh, then they up it to 280 characters. Oh, but if you go on Instagram, you might get a few more sentences in. Oh, but Facebook will allow you to write a whole essay and they'll call it a note. And then it's just a matter of how many ADHD afflicted people are going to sit there and read what you have to say before it gets data mined and your intellectual property is stolen by third parties who want to make money back from paying the networks money for ad space. And further to that, all these elaborations on government control and whatnot that are happening online, and they've got it all very neatly lined up with a single algorithm to silence dissent. And if you stand out too much at any one point in time, even if nobody really notices you, well, you'll get a warning pretty quick, regardless of whether what you're saying is true or not, right or not, for the right reasons or not, valid or not, righteous or not, passionate or not. This is very much a spotlight game. So when we have freedom of speech being compromised by people who are participating for the spotlight, and I'll give you an example. Out here in Australia, we have a Victorian Premier, the state of Victoria Premier Daniel Andrews. During COVID, I didn't have any social media at that point. I've abhorred it since I started doing this research, which is 5 years ago now. But when COVID happened and I got wind of the fact through word of mouth that our Premier, Daniel Andrews, was continuing with the restrictions, long past them being necessary, and at the expense of businesses and the mental health and well-being of 7 million people, I was compelled to open up a Twitter account and get right into the hashtags on that topic and continue to speak on it until something was done. It took 2 weeks of constant commentary from myself, but eventually we were able to stir up enough of a whirlwind to make sure that the Premier stopped preventing businesses from operating by lifting the restrictions. And he eventually did. The boys in Lygon Street became very unhappy. There were businesses all over that were very unhappy. The response from people online became very aggressive, and it became apparent to the law enforcement and to the state government that they would have a massive problem on their hands if they didn't back off and stop treating us like ants that you can just sort of lock up in a little cage and tell us to stay there until it's okay to come out, with no regard for human rights or any sense of empathy or compassion for what people are going through, and all on the basis of 2 people got a sniffle and a bunch of old people died. It is ridiculous. That being the case, I went on Twitter and I started my onslaught from protected signal, and it lasted for 2 weeks before I was banned. So it's no surprise to me to get censored, silenced or banned. As long as what I've said hit the intended mark, my job's done. But what was interesting during those 2 weeks is when I saw the number of people who were Dan Andrews fans. They actually had a fan club. Yes, a fan club for a politician. I know. And it very quickly became obvious that they had no connection to the moral dilemma of it. They showed no empathy for suffering people. They had seemed to exhibit no incentive whatsoever to have any sense of caring for the sick, for the elderly, for the poor, for the lonely, and for people who were very quickly staring down the barrel of impending homelessness. They were more focused on what attention they could get from Dan Andrews as Dan Andrews fans. And in the cases where they weren't even thinking like that, they were happy to get attention just from being contrary and going against the incredible surge from the general public who were opposing these abhorrent restrictions. Now, these people often made no sense. They had no legitimate argument. They could not offer a reasonable retort to anything that was suggested to them. They engaged in bullying, slander, nasty ad hominem remarks, and were driven solely by trying to get their hashtag into the trending topics on Twitter. This is the point that I'm trying to make. They were driven solely by getting their hashtag into the trending topics on Twitter. Why? So that they could be seen. Why? Because that's why they are there. Why? To get the spotlight so they can feel like they're on TV and somebody's looking at them. And when we have millions of people doing this through smartphones for the wrong reasons, when they're not educated enough on the subject to know what they're talking about, when they have no spiritual roots in the common good, we are under attack. So whether I comment on my page, whether I rant for an hour in one of my podcasts, whether I comment on someone else's page, I'm going to talk for as long as I like, on whatever I like. And that's it. And if anybody has a problem with it, they could at least supply to me at least one reason why. Then maybe we can have a discussion. But with the evidence that I have on what is actually happening, and the problems that telecommunications have caused by allowing internet and apps to fly through the air at the speed of light all the time, the problems that have been caused to people's mental health by allowing them to have smartphones when they're not educated enough to even understand what the technology is doing to their brain. When we old schoolers have been online since before the invention of this smartphone technology, are now, being sort of put out to pasture a bit and shoved off to one side because we practice the old school way of doing things, which is actually to write something that's longer than just one sentence, to actually offer a well-rounded point of view with reasons why and a legitimate argument and a basis for saying it. This is, we're now looking at a difference in the quality of public debate. And when we have social media apps causing ADHD to the extent that the reply is no more than 140 characters or 280 characters, what are we really saying? Oh, yes, you can have your say, but just don't make it too long and don't do it too often. It gets annoying. It just looks like you're trying to hijack everything. You just let everyone talk. Let everyone talk. Let everyone have their say. Well, here's the interesting thing. Is anybody listening? Who's listening? Everybody's talking. Over 2 billion people online. Nearly 3, is it? Probably more by now. Who's listening? Everybody's talking, nobody listening. So what difference does it make if I get on here and have a go? What difference is it going to make? I'm just joining the noise, right? Except here's the difference. See if you can tune in to the difference between what you hear internally when you read a comment that has been made by phone and a comment that has been made by protected signal. They're two completely different realms. So when it comes to free speech, censorship, and the law, well, straight up, The law has been broken. It was broken a long time ago. It's actually not. It's not considered. It's actually illegal for national security reasons for the internet to be attacked by a phone signal, external phone signal that's coming through towers, because none of it's secure. None of it's secure. All of it can be hacked into, whether there's encryption or not. It also, as I said in a previous podcast, it presents a huge problem for the intelligence agencies in the army when they're trying to sort through signal to see if there's any signal approaching, and they've got to weed out all the social media. They actually have to weed out all the social media. The airwaves are absolutely saturated. Absolutely saturated. I recently had to put make a change on my channel so that all comments would be held for review. And then I would publish the ones that I think that are totally fine or whatever. To stop spam is the reason that I did it. It was to actually stop spam. And occasionally you get nasties which don't really achieve anything much and only do harm by being nasty. So, for me, I'm not really interested in protecting the feelings of smartphone users. I think it's obvious by now that they weren't a good idea. They're still not a good idea, and that 98% of people don't need one. And with free speech and relativity, it becomes a very interesting discussion. I think I've raised a few points here that are, go into the inner workings of that. Relative in what context, especially when we have the majority of the population abusing the privilege, the right of free speech, abusing it, and calling flagrant abuse free speech. I mean, there are laws offline that prevent harassment. There's laws offline that prevent unwanted contact, but for some reason online it's called free speech. So it's confusing, right? It's relative and it's confusing. So for me, I'd rather rant 100 times over passionately on a subject that I'm right into with all seriousness. Through my protected signal, broadband connection to the internet, than, listen to a whole bunch of smartphone terrorists stab away a sentence here and there. Sort of a little bit like dropping garbage in space. It's just like these far-flung little opinions that don't really do much of anything. They just confirm sort of what's already being said. But there is no discussion that opens up from it. And what I have noticed when I've done that is that nobody notices what I'm saying, because it's TLDR, too long didn't read. And they don't really know what to say because they have actually lost the ability to actually discuss something. They either fight in the comments, or at some point they might sort of get into, what's the most popular comment, and then have a little bit of a discussion among themselves. And then from there it might turn into a discussion. But this is all done off the bat of a single comment that hits them in the middle of the brain the hardest. They see the likes go up, and they want to get in there and get with what's the most popular conversation is, whether it's the best point that's been made or not. The most popular versus what is correct or what is actually true. The most popular versus what is correct or what is actually true. So free speech, I know where are we with that now? Where are we with that? if we're all coming at it from different points of view and different elevations of consciousness and different backgrounds in terms of our education, and what are we doing if we're all jumping into the same swimming pool, and it's the girl or the guy with the hottest bathing suit that everybody flocks around, instead of the more studious type, or someone who's actually researched the subject thoroughly, has been around a lot longer, who's sort of over to one corner of the pool, only sort of talking to themselves, really. I mean, they may as well just be on a different fucking planet. So, yeah, free speech for who? Free speech for who? Free speech for who? And what is it? What's actually being said? Is anybody listening? What does it matter if millions of people can attack a neural interface through a smartphone and go unnoticed and unreprimanded? It's because they've only taken up a sentence of space, and or the rest of the people who are old school, actually with enough of an education and some sort of intelligence quotient that enables us to formulate an argument with the intention of it being for everyone's benefit, and trying to get somewhere with things like politics, the issues that concern us, technology. I mean, look, we can all make our point until the cows come home. What's being done? What's being done? If I get into it, it's because I need stimulation, to be honest, and I'd rather get stimulated by topics that interest me than topics that don't. And where it comes to topics that are right smack bang in my interests and support the work that I'm doing, I'll go on for ages. I can think of 100 different ways of putting it. I see other people's comments. I can comment to that. That's just me. I have a lot of energy. I don't want to just limit what I say online to these podcasts. I have over 500 files where I didn't say a word. I compiled over 500 files of thousands upon thousands of screenshots to show evidence of something terrible that is occurring. And, at the end of the day, it all gets down to free speech, censorship. Have you hashtagged it too many times? Did you say the right thing? Is there a rude picture in it? No, you need a permit for that. Is it made for kids? No, it's not. Well, okay, then bye. Yeah. So we're back to square one. And the fact of it is that freedom of speech is an idea. We all have it. Nobody can take that right away from us. We are free to speak wherever we like. It's only when we go into other people's environments that they can decide whether or not they want to take that right away from us or not. We are free to speak to anybody at any time. We're even free to speak online at any time, and it will depend on whose feathers get ruffled at that point as to whether or not you will be allowed to continue, because there is no consistency in terms of the reasons behind the censorships that occur. So in terms of relativity, when there is no consistency behind the reasons for why censorship occurs, we can't really say that there's even an understanding of what free speech is. And there's no understanding of the law and what entitles a person to have their right maintained to speak freely. It happens to me a lot. It happened to me recently. It happened to me today, I think, confusingly. And I get it. But at the same time, because nobody's listening to what I have to say anyway. They don't have the attention span. And, I just sort of, enjoy the feeling of being able to get my view out there and off my chest, no matter how many times I want to elaborate on it, since I'm not hurting anybody, and nobody notices anyway. So I don't know what the big deal is. But in contrast, as I said, we have a neural interface, the internet, being attacked by millions of people all over the world, 24 hours a day, in a constant onslaught of water torture that is being constantly spun through every tower on Earth at the speed of light, and most of it is just noise. Multiple frequencies at once, attacking our magnetic field, attacking the way the human mind should work, attacking our biofield, attacking our organs, giving people heart attacks, driving people crazy, causing anxiety, causing people to kill themselves. So I honestly really don't give a shit what it is that I say online or how often I say it. If I'm communicating through protected signal and nobody's paying attention anyway, what's the problem? So if there's somebody out there that I've offended, well, at this point, that's your stuff, not my stuff. There's not much more I can do about that. But I know that the body of work that I have here doesn't get the attention that I think that it should, simply because everybody's on the popularity train and the short sentences train and the smartphone train with the short attention span train. Unfortunately, my research actually takes a certain degree of concentration to be able to take it in, assess it, and see the evidence for themselves. That doesn't happen. It does every now and then, and I'm over the moon when it does, because it's a great relief to know that there are people out there who can see it and who do get it. But most of the rest of everybody else has had their attention span shortened by smartphones and social media apps and getting likes for their 12-word sentence. Then it's turned people into TLDRs. They won't read anything that goes too long. If there's 500 files of evidence on something, they're not going to rifle through it. If they don't understand it within the first 4 seconds, they'll call it crazy. They're the type of people who, they'll only agree that algebra is valid if a scientist says it is, whether they understand it or not. But if you come to them with algebra, they'll call it nuts because they don't understand it, and you're on your own and you've got no backup, and who are you anyway? Relative, freedom of speech, comprehension skills all seem to be relative now to the devices that are being used, the attention span that's available to people. So when I make a point about a monkey grabbing a phone and suddenly realizing that there's a little bit of something happening in its sad life, it doesn't really know how to navigate what is happening, but it'll jump up and down and beat its chest if it gets a banana. That's a smartphone. That's social media apps. That is the entirety of where human intelligence has gone into that. Human intelligence devolving into that. Free speech, relativity, and the law. Universal law says I can speak anytime I like, anywhere I like, as long as I'm not hurting anybody. Tricky, right? If we're talking about politicians, well, I'm going to say things that'll hurt their feelings. So relative, right? If I say things about the general public and smartphones and how they'll create fan clubs for politicians, and I say it in a particularly condescending way as to make out that they're just monkeys, well, that's going to hurt people's feelings, isn't it? It's still true, though. So there we are. It's very much a subjective thing at the end of the day. But I do know, well, I feel that I do know one thing for sure, and that is if what I'm saying is true, it shouldn't be censored. That's all. Thank you. I'll be back soon.